Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, thank you. How's everybody? Yep, that's what I thought. My name is Kevin. I'm one of the pastors here. Thanks for joining us this morning. And if you're joining us online, welcome. So glad that you've chosen to be with us. We are in the middle of a series that we are calling Journey Next. And before I get there, I just want to share with you that Mike Erie and his family are in the throes of figuring out moving down here. They live right now in Columbus, Ohio. He's our teaching pastor. Justina, his wife, is looking for a teaching job here, and she's had several interviews. So please be in prayer for them as they make the transition. And he will be with us next weekend, I believe. But if you ever moved, just pray for him, okay? Moved with kids, yeah, okay, there we go. We'll just leave it at that. So just be and pray for them as that comes about. But 2 weeks ago, Mike spoke on love over fear, understanding one of our primary core values, or however you want to put this, as our North Star, something that invades our culture. We want to be people that love one another, not be afraid to do that which is even counterculture. So he spoke on that. Last week, Susie spoke on wells and fences and the Samaritan, the woman at the well, and how we oftentimes put up fences and barriers that keep people from Jesus. She talked about that. We want to be a place that's more focusing on the well, the person of Christ, rather than the fences around that. This morning, we just move into a conversation around the table. And as we do that, I want to take you on a little journey. I'm going to set this up, and then I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and go to a place with me. And I grew up in northern Minnesota, a little town. And in that little town, we had 6 elementary schools, I think maybe 7, but I don't remember, somewhere in that category. But we all came together in one junior high school. So when from 6th grade to 7th grade, we all went from all our elementary schools to one big school. And it was 7th through 9th. It wasn't middle school. And we had what was called mod scheduling. Mod scheduling is that every 20 minutes you went somewhere else, or you had a group of them together, like you could be one place in an hour, whatever. And in doing so, they spaced out when people went to lunch, okay? Okay, so now I need you just to close your eyes for a second. I need you to go back to 7th grade. If you're already in 7th grade, this is really easy. Okay, so you're in 7th grade. It's kind of a new environment. You know a few people, don't know a lot of people. Okay, so what I learned real quick is that the lunchroom smells a particular way. Nasty place. But that smell is seared into my brain. I knew that I got scheduled for lunch at a time when I didn't know anybody. And so most of my classmates from my previous elementary school were at a different time. And so now join me here, close your eyes. We're walking into the lunchroom, the cafeteria, and all that is that you could remember that to be. Think very large and a lot of people you don't know, okay? So I walk into the room filled with anxiety because I just didn't know what to expect. And so I walked in, and the first thing I did was I scanned the room for a familiar face. Please let there be somebody I know. Please let there be somebody I know. And in my scanning of the room, nobody I knew. So now my anxiety is rising, and my palms are starting to sweat a little bit. So I said, okay, somebody, not just somebody friendly. Can I just, a friendly face, somebody who would look at me and go, yeah, you can sit with us. Come over here. Scan the room again. Nothing. No friendly faces, no nods, nothing. Nobody even, it was like I had something growing on me. So I'm standing there, I'm holding my tray, and I go, okay, third thing. Somebody as desperate as me. Somebody as desperate as me. So I'm scanning the room now, and I lock eyes with a guy. And he's doing the exact same thing I am. So we ended up sitting together, and I found solace in desperation. But have you ever been there? Can you feel that with me for just a minute? Just a minute. Let that settle on you for a minute. I think that experience, I know that experience has lingered in my life for a long, long time. That fear of not being known, that fear of being rejected, that fear of walking into a room and not knowing anyone or what to do or how to get to point A to point B. And there's something about, if you've watched any teenage movie, you see the lunchroom scene and you go, I hate the lunchroom scene. Because there's a natural rejection, because people are sitting in groups where they know each other, they're sitting in groups where they're like each other, and they're sitting in groups where they're passing judgment on every other table in the room. And so the best part of this story is this, is that guy that I ended up sitting across from, his name is Grant, and Grant and I became great friends, and Grant was the best man at my wedding, and I was the best man at his wedding, and it is one of those stories where you go, that can't be, well, it's true, but there was a moment, right? That moment kind of somehow locked us, because we were the two that had nowhere else to go or to be in that moment. And this is the idea of the table. This morning, as we talk about this, I want you to join me in this idea of what it is to be at the table and being accepted and being a part of something and understanding that there's somebody with a tray that's going, where do I sit? Where do I belong? Where do I get to be? And that's where I want you to start. I'll take you through this in such a way that you begin to embrace this idea that the table that Jesus talks about, the banquet table that is described for eternity, is full of diversity. It is, you're going to be at the table with people you never dreamed you would ever eat with. And there's some real power in that, because in the diversity, I spoke on this a while ago, but diversity is the power of the church, because we're not uniform. We're actually unified in our diversity. And so that means we don't look for people that just look like us or act like us or behave like us or have the same belief system as us, but we align and find ourselves in a group of diverse people, and we love one another. And so as we go about this morning, I just want to remind you that what is, and I don't think you need reminding, but this is something that has settled on me for the last several months. I've been living in a little bit of a state of sadness. That sadness is a result of many things, from relational loss to the experience over this last year of just being isolated, just a struggle of a year. And so I think for me, this last year has been a revealing of, I have deep emotions I didn't even know I had, and they are starting to come out. And I don't think it's anything to be fixed, but I think there's a sense of where we really can't share those things with one another because we're so distant from one another. We've been told, keep everybody at least at 6 feet. And it's really hard to build relationship and build community and build on that idea when people are told, don't have people in your house and don't get within 6 feet of them. That's just really hard. And so with that, I want us to take a look fresh, new this morning. I know that we've told a couple stories recently that you go, yeah, I know that one. Well, this morning is another one that you know. And I just want to invite you into a familiar story. Allow it to rest on you new. Hear it through the lens of the current culture we're in, and the idea that we're being invited to a feast to a table, to a party. And the familiar story is the story of the two sons and the prodigal father. And it's found in Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32. Is that me? I trimmed my beard so it won't be a problem. Next time, I'm just going to let it be long. So Luke chapter 15, 11 through 32. What I'd like you to do as I read this is find the one character in there that you identify with the most. And it can be the prodigal son, it can be the son that stays home, it could be the father, it could be one. I sometimes find myself identifying with the servant that has to go and tell the wayward, the older son that his brother's home. Just breaking bad news to people seems to be part of my dilemma of life. But there is, so whoever you identify with, listen to the story through that lens, okay? Jesus continued, and he said, there was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided this property between them. First of all, the audience would have been very alarmed to hear this. They wouldn't normally do this. And verse 13, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Again, very offensive. Verse 16, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, I love that phrase, when he came to his senses. It took him this long to come to his senses, but anyway, okay. He said, how many of my father's hired servants has food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father left the party, went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you all are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so now let's put yourself in the party. Let's put yourself in the story. Let's put ourselves into this moment in time. And you find yourself identifying with somebody in the story, somebody that you go, yeah, I've been that prodigal, I've been that judgmental brother, I've been in parties like this. You find yourself answering these questions in totally different ways based upon your point of view, based upon who you identify with. And so oftentimes I find myself identifying with the older son. And here's the thing about being the older son. The older son has a justice streak in him, has this isn't right. This just isn't right. You don't throw a party for somebody who squanders half your wealth on stuff that he shouldn't have. And really, in the back of that older son's mind is, it's really mine. This is my stuff that you're using to celebrate that guy. Because everything that you have, Dad, is mine. Because he already took his half and left. And this is just wrong. I should have at least been consulted about the party. I should have at least been consulted about the guest list. I should somehow have been made aware of this, right? There's a sense of justice. This is wrong. And I'm not going to a party where we're celebrating that guy. I'm just not. And you hear it. You hear it in the sense of where, oh, I get it. I understand that because I am that. I understand that because I think I've actually said that out loud before. I actually understand the older son. I actually understand the younger son too, who's coming back, seeking forgiveness, trying to get things right, is willing to take a lesser role. You can find yourself in either of these roles. And the beauty of it is that they're two very contrasting types of people, and the Father invites both of them to the feast. The judgmental one and the wayward one. And he says, we're going to gather, we're going to have a feast, we're going to have a party. And one of them goes, the one who has done the most violating in the eyes of the one goes, yeah, I'm in, I'll be at the party. But the one who seemingly had done everything right up until that point refuses to go. Here's the dilemma. Here's the crux of the story, isn't it? It is to identify with this idea of, I only want to go to the party if the people there are the ones I want to be with. And even though the story revolves around God being the Father, Jesus is making the point of, oftentimes we don't even want to go where we're invited by God because of the people that are there. I want to decide for the Father who gets invited, so that I want to be there. When I was younger, I look back, I have a lot of oh man, what was I thinking moments. I know probably some of you are in the throes of what was I thinking. Some of you have maybe never thought, what was I thinking? I've always been right. And I look back, and going to seminary and going to school and doing all the things that I've done to prep to be a pastor, it kind of sets you up to argue with people. It sets you up to argue with them about doctrine, small things of doctrine, like, should babies be sprinkled or dedicated? I don't care anymore. But you asked me that when I'm 29, now we have a throwdown argument. Forgive me if any of you have ever been in an argument with me about that. Some people believe that, everybody should speak in tongues. And I've never spoken in tongues my entire life. And I would argue with people over whether or not people should speak in tongues. You know what? I don't care anymore if people speak in tongues. There is this sense of where I wanted to be right, but I wanted people to believe like I believe about even the little things. I have strong convictions about some things now, and really, really not strong convictions about other things. But even in those strong convictions, I have learned something extraordinarily valuable over my years, is that I've never argued anyone into my position, even if I was right. Never. I can't think of one time. I wish I could. I wish I could sit here and go, yeah, I remember that one time where I actually convinced somebody that I was right. And you know where that leads me? It leads me straight to pride. All that to say is this, is that oftentimes what God has set up as diversity, I see as a problem. And so when we gather at a table, and that table is full of people that we do not know, or we know them and we kind of know them, the point of the table isn't so that we can get them to agree with us. Whew. See, throwing that off makes the table much more inviting. And then being at the table becomes this conversation about being known and learning who others are. It shifts the conversation. I don't have to have you agree with me to like you. So I find myself sometimes just sad because of my previous relationships and how I handled them. And in them, I see myself as that older brother. You know, if you're going to believe that about baptism, you and I, we're not going to sit at the table together. And when I say it out loud, it's really dumb. I find myself going, oh, what was I thinking? I was thinking that I wanted to be right. And now I'm more interested in the diversity than I am in the uniformity. I'm more interested in how you're different than me than how you are the same. I'm finding that what changes me is when a group of people get together and they think different and they approach life different because they have a different life story. They have a different experience. And they've come to that place through a totally different experience than what I came to my experience with and my conclusions with. And I find myself going, I can understand why you believe you can lose your salvation. I understand that. Rather than to try to get you to believe that you can't. I can understand why you would believe that infant baptism saves someone. I can understand that. Rather than to say, you shouldn't believe that. It shifts the story. Because now I understand why you believe the way you believe. And I understand the person you are. I understand why you believe the way you do about politics. I understand the way you believe the way you do about your football team, because your football team is not very good. I already know mine's not. So you just go, oh, okay, I get it. And there's no sense of, I need to change you. There's just a sense of understanding the culture of the table or the feast. The feast is you bring your diversity, I bring my diversity, and together we find ourselves in this place where that etiquette around the table is focused on other things than what we originally thought they should be. I want to just share with you just the contrast. And the contrast is this. The contrast we find ourselves in is that the church, the table that the church describes or Jesus describes or that feast is rooted in these ideas. It's rooted in grace instead of judgment. Too many times we go to the table and we size up the people at the table in the feast and we go, and we make judgments. We make quick judgments. We decide things before we know their story, rather than entering into the table with grace. Jesus always entered the table with grace. Meaning, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. The second one is that forgiveness permeates the table instead of condemnation. Oh, okay, you did me wrong. But forgiveness comes with the table. It comes with the culture of the table. I'm not going to hold it against you anymore. I'm not going to be the person. This is where the older brother obviously struggled. I'm holding it against not only my brother, but I'm going to hold it against you, the father. There's a verse in Romans chapter 15, verse 7. It says, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you. I remember that. I memorized that verse a long time ago because I was trying to figure out the difference between acceptance and tolerance. Tolerance is a big word culturally for us. And the difference between the table in the church and the table everywhere else is the difference between acceptance and tolerance. Acceptance is I accept you for who you are. I want to know who you are. I don't want to just tolerate you. You ever sat at a table where somebody tolerates you? I have. Oh, you're the one. You're the problem. And there's a sense of just folded arms. Tolerance comes judgment, condemnation. All of those are in the same family, because they don't bring an openness to the table. They don't bring an invitation to the table. They don't bring conversation to the table. What they bring is, we don't want you here at the table. The culture of the table is questions instead of statements. This is one of the great challenges for some of us. Some of us love statements. Some of us love to talk. Some of us just like to close down the conversation. But if you want to know people, you ask them questions. And if you want to engage in table, like Jesus intended table, if you read what Jesus does at the table, it's all about the questions. Now, some of you in the room are going, well, yeah, that's just being polite. And that's just, some of us don't get that. My natural inclination at a table is to be quiet. Because I grew up where we sat at a table, and if you weren't really spoken to, you didn't say much. So my natural inclination is just to be quiet and listen. I love to listen. And part of my adult version of life is when I walk into a room where I don't know people, is I stand in the back and I watch, because my natural inclination is to be rejected. I think I'll be rejected. And so the table was meant to be, as Jesus describes it, to be a place where grace abounds, forgiveness is assumed, there is a acceptance that is forthcoming and available. There is a myriad of ideas and questions where you become known. And for some of you are like, I don't want to be known. But part of this idea of being a part of a community is to be known, not so that you can be rejected, but that you can be actually loved for who you are. Those are two different things. In some environments, people want to know who you are so that they can get a reason for you to be kept at arm's length or rejected. That's not the point. The point of this, the point of the table in the church, is a version of acceptance and belonging that is predicated upon the fact that you are being revealed for who you really are and then accepted for who you really are. Sounds too good to be true. But that's the church. That's supposed to be what the table is in the environment of Jesus. See, the beauty of the story of the prodigal father is that he invites both his sons with all of their baggage to the feast. He extends forgiveness. He invites them in. And one of them just says, no, thank you, because of who you invited. He misses the point, right? That's the point of the story. He misses the point of the table, of the feast. The other part of the culture is curiosity. The curiosity, and instead of assumptions, we contrast those two things. Curiosity is man, how did you end up here? Why do you? And there's no condemnation. There's no judgment. There's actually no assumptions. Oftentimes we walk into environments with assumptions. We assume we know. There's nothing better than being surprised when you have assumptions. I've already stated this one, but there's a diversity instead of uniformity. There are people that are different than us. The idea that I could sit around a table and get sharpened by people who think different, that have a different life experience, and they come at life a different way, changes the way that I interact with them. It changes the way I interact with the world, changes the way I interact with God. And God accepts them as much as he accepts me, even though I've come at it from a totally different way. That's the beauty of this idea of the table. And then there is this idea of being instead of doing. Sometime in my future, when COVID is no longer a thing, probably will be the rest of my life, but let's just pretend. But I want to go to Italy. Never been to Italy. And I want to have a meal there. I have been told about meals in Italy. Anybody go to Italy and have a meal? Oh, yeah. It's not about the food. It's about the experience. And I'm hoping there's like 7 courses. And somebody told me that sometimes they last 2 or 3 hours long. And around that table is an experience of getting to know the people you're eating with, coupled with some good wine. I understand really good wine. But pasta and appetizers, and I understand their desserts are amazing. So if you could like have 6 layers of dessert, and anyway, I love dessert. Can you put yourself around a table with a group of, just diverse group of people and enjoy a great 6-course meal for 2.5 hours and not have an agenda? And just have good conversation. See, that's what I envision the meal, the table to be like with Jesus. That's what it was meant to be. There's this invitation to come and bring your personhood, bring who you are, recline at the table, have a glass of wine. Here's the appetizer. So how did you get here? What's going on in your life? What's troubling you? Let's talk. Let's know each other. It's the table, conversation. Conflict will happen, but conflict always happens. But if the culture of the table is forgiveness and acceptance and grace and all of those things, conflict becomes a non-issue because it's just part of the sharpening and the dialogue and the joy of getting to know people. Because if there is no conflict, then you're really not getting to know each other. That's just true. And conflict can be so fun if it's done well. And the beauty of it is at the table, you don't have to win the conflict. It's not about winning it. It's about understanding. It's about the dialogue. It's about the conversation. And you know what? You can get up and leave a table without agreeing and be happy about it. In this kind of table where grace and forgiveness and acceptance abound, it's not about agreement. It's about being known and knowing. See, around that table, compassion is dominant. And being around a table where people are being vulnerable and being themselves, you will find yourself being changed. Because that's community. Life-changing community. But oftentimes, what we find ourselves doing, and much to our chagrin, is we seek out people who think like us, look like us, are not going to disagree with us, are not going to be, and we make that decision from an external view, and we don't gather at a table with diversity. That's just sad. That's what that is. It's just sad. But the invitation is that we will do that. I'm gonna ask you to again join me in a place. It's a little uncomfortable, but it's the same place. But I'm going to ask you now to take a risk. We are moving forward as a church. This is when we talk about Journey Next, we talk about the table, and we talk about diversity, and we talk about being at the table and being known, and we want to invite people into that. So we are specifically setting aside Sunday night 2 weeks from now to invite you in and say, you can sign up online for July 16th and to take a risk and say, you know what, I'm going to meet some new people, I'm going to step into this, I'm going to do this. Because I want to be known. Now, I get it. Not everybody's ready. Not everybody's ready to do that because of the pandemic, but this is going to be part of our ongoing future. You know, somebody came up afterwards and asked me, are those Bible studies? Nope, they're not. They are meals where we sit and talk and we get to know one another. No agenda. But, I mean, for some of us, questions come easy. For others, they do not. So we will definitely send out some questions you can ask for questions to just get to know each other. But we all know awkward, right? Sat at a table and, oh, this is awkward. awkward is a beautiful thing because all you got to do is break that with getting to know each other. Not, so how many verses have you memorized and which Bible study do you want to do? That's not what we're about. We're about knowing Jesus. We're about knowing our Bibles. All that's true. But this, the table, is about acceptance. It's about belonging. It's about being in relationship. And we want to invite you into that, and we're being very intentional about it. So I'm going to invite the band up, and as the band is coming up, we are going to do communion. So the last 3 songs this morning, during those 3 songs, by the way, they're great songs, we have tables positioned around the room. The table, obviously, we're doing this because it's a reminder of what we all have in common in our diversity. And I want to invite you to the table. Just go to one of those, pick up one of the friendly little packages, bring it back to your seat, and speak with Jesus about this. The other story, I just want to close this with a story that kind of picks up on going into a lunchroom. So a few years after that, my family moved from Minnesota to Wisconsin. So we moved when I was still in high school to Wisconsin. New place, new high school. And and the lunchroom experience came to the top again. This time I knew no one, just like the last time. And the same feeling, same smells, same thing. And this time, when I was a junior in high school, I never went. I just made the decision, I'm not going to ever do that again. So I never went to lunch in the lunchroom in my high school. I'm very thankful that it was an open campus. I just went home. There's something really sad about that, in that a lot of friends could have been made over lunch. I could have been known, and I could have known other people. But I was afraid to be rejected again. So I chose not to go. I started dating a girl in high school. I actually ended up marrying her. And she was always a little tick that I would never go to lunch with her in the lunchroom. Part of the deal, right? But I never really wanted to walk into an environment where I wasn't known and I knew I wouldn't be accepted. Here's the story and why I told you. It's because we need to be the people who accept those that look like they're scared to death. And we need to invite them into relationship. You might be one of them. We want to invite you into relationship. We want to make the table be a place where you can belong and be accepted and find Jesus and Jesus followers. So as we close the gathering here with this music and these things, just be mindful as you take communion. It's the table. And Jesus invites everyone.